Yeah.
I'm really enjoying this, and I don't even know where the book came from.
Wow.
I don't know if somebody gave it to me or if I picked it up at the secondhand store, or because I never
Yeah.
buy new novels, they're too expensive.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure. Yeah. Just love those secondhand stores, don't you?
Linda, how is Ed?
Oh, yeah.
It's good. He's doing really good. Thanks.
My signal's all scrambled, Sandy, on the Roku. Well, I
Gotta
don't-
pay your bill, Dave.
Yeah, I just made partial payments, so I'm only get partial pictures. That it?
Yeah.
There you go.
So are we on
Mine
chapter 23?
Yep,
Yeah.
you
Okay,
got it.
diet and health. And that's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about, yeah.
Okay. Well, so we ready to get started? You think?
Go ahead.
4 minutes after
Yeah.
the hour.
We should start.
Okay. Well, shall we pray first?
Yes.
Okay. Heavenly Father, once again, we're so blessed to be here to study your word, to find out the things that we need to be better in life, to be more like Christ, to show his character when we go out in the field. So we just want to ask Holy Spirit to guide us in this lesson and to help us digest the things that we need to know and share with others. So thank you once again. Your son, Yeshua's name I pray. Amen. Okay, so I guess Violet, you're going to start.
Yeah, I'll start.
George, Barb, and then Linda.
That's good.
Okay, that's the way my picture shows.
Our bodies are built up from the food we eat. There is a constant breaking down of the tissues of the body. Every movement of every organ involves waste, and this waste is repaired from our food. Each organ of the body requires its share of nutrition. The brain must be supplied with its portion. The bones, muscles, and nerves demand theirs. It is a wonderful process that transforms the food into blood and uses this blood to build up the varied parts of the body. But this process is going on continually, supplying with life and strength to each nerve, muscle, and tissue. Selection of food. These foods should be chosen that best supply the elements needed for building up the body. In this choice, appetite is not a safe guide. Through wrong habits of eating, the appetite has become perverted. Often it demands food that impairs health and causes weakness instead of strength. We cannot safely be guided by the customs of society. The disease and suffering that everywhere prevail are largely due to popular errors in regard to diet. In order to know what are the best foods, we must study God's original plan for man's diet. He who created man and who understands his needs appointed Adam his food. Behold, he said, I have given you every herb yielding seed and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food. Upon leaving Eden to gain his livelihood by tilling the earth under the curse of sin, men received permission to eat also the herb of the field. Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. These foods, prepared in as simple and natural a manner as possible, are the most healthful and nourishing. They impart a strength, a power of endurance, and a vigor of intellect that are not afforded by a more complex and stimulating diet. But not all foods, wholesome in themselves, are equally suited to our needs under all circumstances. Care should be taken in the selection of food. Our diet should be suited to the season, to the climate in which we live, and to the occupation we follow. Some foods that are adapted for use at one season or in one climate are not suited to another. So there are different foods best suited for persons in different occupations. Often food that can be used with benefit by those engaged in hard physical labor is unsuitable for persons of sedentary pursuits or intense mental application. God has given us an ample variety of healthful foods, and each person should choose from it the things that experience and sound judgment prove to be best suited to his own necessities. Nature's abundant supply of fruits, nuts, and grains is ample, and year by year, the product of all lands are more generally distributed to all by the increased facilities for transportation. As a result, many articles of food, which a few years ago were regarded as expensive luxuries, are now within the reach of all as foods for everyday use. This is especially the case with dried and canned fruits. Nuts and nut foods are coming largely into use to take the place of flesh meats. With nuts may be combined grains, fruits, and some roots to make food that are healthful and nourishing. Care should be taken, however, not to use too large a proportion of nuts. Those who realize ill effects from the use of nut foods may find the difficulty removed by attending to this precaution. It should be remembered, too, that some nuts are not so wholesome as others. Almonds are preferable to peanuts, but peanuts in limited quantities used in connection with grains are nourishing and digestible. When properly prepared, olives, like nuts, supply the place of butter and flesh meats. The oil as eaten in the olive is far preferable to animal oil or fat. It serves as a laxative. Its use will be found beneficial to consumption, and it is healing to an inflamed, irritated stomach. Persons who have accustomed themselves to a rich, highly stimulating diet have an unnatural taste, and they cannot at once relish food that is plain and simple. It will take time for the taste to become natural and for the stomach to recover from the abuse it has suffered. But those who persevere in the use of wholesome food will, after a time, find it palatable. Its delicate and delicious flavors will be appreciated, and it will be eaten with greater enjoyment than can be derived from unwholesome dainties, and the stomach in a healthy condition, neither fevered nor overtaxed, can readily perform its task. In order to maintain health, a sufficient supply of good, nourishing food is needed. If we plan wisely, that which is most conducive to health can be secured in almost every land. The various preparations of rice, wheat, corn, and oats are sent abroad everywhere. Also beans, peas, and lentils. These, with native or imported fruits and the variety of vegetables that grow in each locality, give an opportunity to select a dietary that is complete without the use of flesh meats. Wherever fruit can be grown in abundance, a liberal supply should be prepared for winter by canning or drying. Small fruits such as currants, gooseberries, strawberries, raspberries, and blackberries can be grown to advantage in many places where they are but little used and their cultivation is neglected. For household canning, glass rather than tin cans should be used whenever possible. It is especially necessary that the fruit for canning should be in good condition. Use little sugar and cook the fruit only long enough to ensure its preservation. Thus prepared, it is an excellent substitute for fresh fruit. Wherever dried fruits, such as raisins, prunes, apples, pears, peaches, and apricots, are obtainable at moderate prices, it will be found that they can be used as staple articles of diet much more freely than is customary, with the best results to the health and vigor of all classes of workers. There should not be a great variety at any one meal, for this encourages overeating and causes indigestion. It is not well to eat fruit and vegetables at the same meal. If the digestion is feeble, the use of both will often cause distress and inability to put forth mental effort. It is better to have the fruit at one meal and the vegetables at another. The meals should be varied. The same dishes, prepared in the same way, should not appear on the table meal after meal and day after day. The meals are eaten with greater relish, and the system is better nourished when the food is varied.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I remember always put bananas in your cereal with
Mhm.
milk, and
Mhm.
then your digestion is messed up for all day, and didn't know that. See, if I'd been studying Sister White, I would have known about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you can do it with coconut milk.
Well, we didn't have coconuts back in Missouri. Oh, we had cows, lots of.
Yeah.
You didn't have coconut cows?
My grandma
That's-
used to eat cereal with sugar and milk, and she went to the hospital years later, and they thought that she was had been an alcoholic, and they're like, she never
Right.
drank, and it was because of all the milk and the sugar mixed together did something. I don't know, but it never
Mhm.
bothered me.
Wow.
I could put bananas in cereal. I could
Yeah,
eat mixed things, and my system was always good. But some people, it's really, you have to be careful.
Yeah, you
I
have
guess
to know,
tomorrow people better be careful.
I
yeah, you
read
have to know
somewhere.
your body, and you have to adjust
Yeah.
to what your body needs.
I read
When I
somewhere
was,
that
when I
sugar-
was a baby, we had to have a goat because I could not tolerate milk.
Mhm.
Oh,
But I was raised on goat milk. And even now I use almond milk instead of any
Oh,
other
yeah.
kind of milk.
I
yeah.
never did really like milk, but I heard that read somewhere that sugar is a substitute for alcoholics.
Yeah, it can be
Yeah.
addictive.
You know,
Yeah,
it
sure.
works on your brain in the same kind of way.
Yep,
Mhm.
Is that right?
and it's addictive. It's just as addictive, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, every time I go to the post office, I have to drive by a donut shop. It's like the steering wheel keeps wanting to pull me in there. Go on, you need a donut. No, I don't. Okay, go ahead, George.
Preparation of food. It is wrong to eat merely to gratify the appetite, but no indifference should be manifested regarding the quality of the food or the manner of its preparation. If the food eaten is not relished, the body will not be so well nourished. The food should be carefully chosen and prepared with intelligence and skill. For use in bread making, the superfine white flour is not the best. Its use is neither healthful nor economical. Fine flour bread is lacking in nutritive elements to be found in bread made from the whole wheat. It is a frequent cause of constipation and other unhealthful conditions. The use of soda or baking powder in bread making is harmful and unnecessary. Soda causes inflammation of the stomach and often poisons the entire system. Many housewives think that they cannot make good bread without soda, but this is an error. If they would take the trouble to learn better methods, their bread would be more wholesome, and to a natural taste, it would be more palatable. In the making of raised or yeast bread, milk should not be used in place of water. The use of milk is an additional expense, and it makes the bread much less wholesome. Milk bread does not keep sweet so long after baking, as does that made with water, and it ferments more readily in the stomach. Bread should be light and sweet. Not the least hint of sourness should be tolerated. The loaf should be small and so thoroughly baked that so far as possible the yeast germ shall be destroyed. When hot or new, raised bread of any kind is difficult of digestion. It should never appear on the table. This rule does not, however, apply to unleavened bread. Fresh rolls made of wheaten meal without yeast or leaven and baked in a well-heated oven are both wholesome and palatable. Grains used for porridge or mush should have several hours cooking, but softer liquid foods are less wholesome than dry foods, which require thorough mastication. Zwieback or twice-baked bread is one of the most easily digested and most palatable of foods. Let ordinary raised bread be cut in slices and dried in a warm oven till the last trace of moisture disappears. Then let it be browned slightly all the way through. In a dry place, this bread can be kept much longer than ordinary bread, and if reheated before using, it will be as fresh as when new. Far too much sugar is ordinarily used in food. Cakes, sweets, puddings, pastries, jellies, jams are active causes of indigestion. Especially harmful are custards and puddings, in which milk, eggs, and sugar are the chief ingredients. The free use of milk and sugar taken together should be avoided. If milk is used, it should be thoroughly sterilized. With this precaution, there is less danger of contracting disease from its use. Butter is less harmful when eaten on cold bread than when used in cooking, but as a rule, it is better to dispense with it altogether. Cheese is still more objectionable. It is wholly unfit for food. Safeguarding of the purity of all foods of dairy origin is a matter of prime importance. While frequent testing of dairy herds, together with thorough pasteurization and refrigeration, serves to this end, such foods, if from uncertain sources or if carelessly handled, constitute a serious menace to health. For as stated in the U.S. Department of Agriculture Farmers Bulletin number 1705 by government expert Rowena Schmidt Carpenter, the same chemical constitutes and physical properties that recommend milk as a human food make it an excellent food for bacteria. The reader will understand that the reference to cheese does not include cottage cheese or foods of a similar character, which were ever recognized by the author as wholesome. Scanty, ill-cooked food depraves the blood by weakening the blood-making organs. It deranges the system and brings on disease, with its accompaniment of irritable nerves and bad tempers. The victims of poor cookery are numbered by thousands and tens of thousands. Over many graves might be written, died because of poor cooking, died of an abused stomach. It is a sacred duty for those who cook to learn how to prepare healthful food. Many souls are lost as a result of poor cookery. It takes thought and care to make good bread, but there is more religion in a loaf of good bread than many think. There are few really good cooks. Young women think that it is menial to cook and do other kinds of housework. And for this reason, many girls who marry and have the care of families have little idea of the duties devolving upon a wife and a mother. Cooking is no mean science, and it is one of the most essential in practical life. It is a science that all women should learn, and it should be taught in a way to benefit the poorer classes. To make food appetizing and at the same time simple and nourishing requires skill, but it can be done. Cooks should know how to prepare simple food in a simple and healthful manner, so that it will be found more palatable as well as more wholesome because of its simplicity. Every woman who is at the head of a family and yet does not understand the art of healthful cookery should determine to learn that which is so essential to the well-being of her household. In many places, hygienic cooking schools afford opportunity for instruction in this line. She who has not the help of such facilities should put herself under the instruction of some good cook and persevere in her efforts for improvement until she is a mistress of the culinary art. Regularity in eating is of vital importance. There should be a specified time for each meal. At this time, let everyone eat what the system requires and then take nothing more until the next meal. There are many who eat when the system needs no food, at irregular intervals in between meals because they have not sufficient strength of will to resist inclination. When traveling, some are constantly nibbling if anything eatable is within their reach. This is very injurious. If travelers would eat regularly of food that is simple and nutritious, they would not feel so great weariness nor suffer so much from sickness. Another pernicious habit is that of eating just before bedtime. The regular meals may have been taken, but because there is a sense of faintness, more food is eaten. By indulgence, this wrong practice becomes a habit, and often so firmly fixed that it is thought impossible to sleep without food. As a result of eating late suppers, the digestive process is continued through the sleeping hours. But though the stomach works constantly, its work is not properly accomplished. The sleep is often disturbed with unpleasant dreams, and in the morning the person awakes unrefreshed and with little relish for breakfast. When we lie down to rest, the stomach should have its work all done, that it, as well as the other organs of the body, may enjoy rest. For persons of sedentary habits, late suppers are particularly harmful. With them, the disturbance created is often the beginning of disease that ends in death. In many cases, the faintness that leads to a desire for food is felt because the digestive organs have been too severely taxed during the day. After disposing of one meal, the digestive organs need rest. At least 5 or 6 hours should intervene between the meals. And most persons who give the plan a trial will find that 2 meals a day are better than 3.
Mhm.
Wrong conditions of eating. Food should not be eaten very hot or very cold. If food is cold, the vital force of the stomach is drawn upon in order to warm it before digestion can take place. Cold drinks are injurious for the same reason, while the free use of hot drinks is debilitating. In fact, the more liquid there is taken with the meals, the more difficult it is for the food to digest, for the liquid must be absorbed before digestion can begin. Do not eat largely of salt. Avoid the use of pickles and spiced foods. Eat an abundance of fruit, and the irritation that calls for so much drink at mealtime will largely disappear. Food should be eaten slowly and should be thoroughly masticated.
I wanted to interject something here. A
Mhm.
lot of people use different sentences she has and slam people every time they see them eat.
Mm.
And it really annoys me because I'm like, stop it. If you read all around it, and like right there, some people say, oh, she says to avoid salt, but look at what she says at the end of that sentence. Too much at mealtime. Well, if you don't, then that much drink at mealtime, it helps if you don't drink it and you don't have that much salt.
Yeah.
And it depends on the person and what you're doing and what time it is, and there's intermittent fasting, but you can drink during that time and you can drink cold drinks. It's not going to hurt you. It's just that people just grab hold of some of these and say, she said so. And I'm like, read around it. Her stuff is good, but a lot of it is also her time. A lot of things have changed. But anyway,
Well,
Depends on if she's a prophet or not.
no, that has nothing to do with it because not everything she said is necessarily from God. A lot of it's her health and her knowledge because, of course, that she used to eat things and then changed her mind. So
And
A
how
lot
do you
of
tell
it's
the
good
difference? How do you tell the difference?
are you, George? Go ahead, Barbara.
Just saying.
food should be eaten slowly and should be thoroughly masticated. This is necessary in order that the saliva may be properly mixed with the food and the digestive fluids be called into action. Another serious evil is eating at improper times, as after violent or excessive exercise, when one is much exhausted or heated. Immediately after eating, there is a strong draft upon the nervous energies. And when mind or body is heavily taxed just before or just after eating, digestion is hindered. When one is excited, anxious, or hurried, it is better not to eat until rest or relief is found. The stomach is closely related to the brain. And when the stomach is diseased, the nerve power is called from the brain to the aid of the weakened digestive organs. When these demands are too frequent, the brain becomes congested. When the brain is constantly taxed and there is lack of physical exercise, even plain food should be eaten sparingly. At mealtime, cast off care and anxious thought. Do not feel hurried, but eat slowly and with cheerfulness, with your heart filled with gratitude to God for all his blessings. That's amazing that she knew that back then, because now they are just saying so much that you're Your brain and your gut are so connected, and the gut is where all your immune system comes from. And they're both connected, and she knew that back then.
Mhm.
That's just amazing. Many who discard flesh meats and other gross and injurious articles think that because their food is simple and wholesome, they may indulge appetite without restraint, and they eat to excess, sometimes to gluttony. This is an error. The digestive organs should not be burdened with the quantity or quality of food which it will tax the system to appropriate. Custom has decreed that the food shall be placed upon the table in courses. Not knowing what is coming next, one may eat a sufficiency of food, which perhaps is not the best suited to him. When the last course is brought on, he often ventures to overstep the bounds and take the tempting dessert, which, however, proves anything but good for him. If all the food intended for a meal is placed on the table at the beginning, one has opportunity to make the best choice. Sometimes the result of overeating is felt at once. In other cases, there is no sensation of pain, but the digestive organs lose their vital force and the foundation of physical strength is undermined. The surplus food burdens the system and produces morbid, feverish conditions. It causes an undue amount of blood to the stomach, causing the limbs and extremities to chill quickly. It lays a heavy tax on the digestive organs. And when these organs have accomplished their task, there is a feeling of faintness or languor. Some who are continually overeating call this all gone feeling hunger, but it is caused by the overworked condition of the digestive organs. At times, there is numbness of the brain with disinclination to mental or physical effort. These unpleasant symptoms are felt because nature has accomplished her work at an unnecessary outlay of vital force and is thoroughly exhausted. The stomach is saying, "Give me rest." But with many, the faintness is interpreted as a demand for more food. So instead of giving the stomach rest, another burden is placed upon it. As a consequence, the digestive organs are often worn out when they should be capable of doing good work. We should not provide for the Sabbath a more liberal supply or greater variety of food than for other days. Instead of this, the food should be more simple and less should be eaten in order that the mind may be clear and vigorous to comprehend spiritual things. A clogged stomach means a clogged brain. The most precious words may be heard and not appreciated because the mind is confused by an improper diet. By overeating on the Sabbath, many do more than they think to unfit themselves for receiving the benefit of its sacred opportunities. Cooking on the Sabbath should be avoided, but it is not therefore necessary to eat cold food. In cold weather, the food prepared the day before should be heated, and let the meals, however simple, be palatable and attractive, especially in families where there are children. It is well on the Sabbath to provide something that will be regarded as a treat, something the families do not have every day. Where wrong habits of diet have been indulged, there should be no delay in reform. When dyspepsia has resulted from abuse of the stomach, effort should be made carefully to preserve the remaining strength of the vital force by removing every overtaxing burden. The stomach may never entirely recover health after long abuse, but a proper course of diet will save further debility, and many will recover more or less fully. It is not easy to prescribe rules that will meet every case, but with attention to right principles in eating, great reforms may be made, and the cook need not be continually toiling to tempt the appetite. Abstemiousness in diet is rewarded with mental and moral vigor. It also aids in the control of the passions. Overeating is especially harmful to those who are sluggish and temperate. These should eat sparingly and take plenty of physical exercise. There are men and women of excellent natural ability who do not accomplish half what they might if they would exercise self-control in the denial of appetite. Many writers and speakers fail here. After eating heartily, they give themselves to sedentary occupations, reading, studying, or writing, allowing no time for physical exercise. As a consequence, the free flow of thought and words is checked. They cannot write or speak with the force of intensity necessary in order to reach the heart. Their efforts are tame and fruitless. Those upon whom rest important responsibilities, those above all who are guardians of spiritual interest, should be men of keen feeling and quick perception. More than others, they need to be temperate in eating. Rich and luxurious foods should have no place upon their tables. Every day, men in positions of trust have decisions to make upon which depend results of great importance. Often they have to think rapidly, and this can be done successfully by those only who practice strict temperance. The mind strengthens under the correct treatment of physical and mental powers. If the strain is not too great, new vigor comes with every taxation. But often the work of those who have important plans to consider and important decisions to make it effective or evil by the results of improper diet. A disordered stomach produces a disordered, uncertain state of mind. Often it causes irritability, harshness, or injustice. Many a plan that would have a blessing to the world have been set aside. Many unjust, oppressive, even cruel measures have been carried as a result of disease conditions due to wrong habits of eating. Here is a suggestion for all whose work is sedentary or chiefly mental. Let those who have sufficient moral courage and self-control try it. At each meal, take only 2 or 3 kinds of simple food and eat no more than is required to satisfy hunger. Take active exercise every day and see if you do not receive benefit. Strong men who are engaged in active physical labor are not compelled to be as careful as to the quantity or quality of their food as are persons of sedentary habits. But even these would have better health if they would practice self-control in eating and drinking. Some wish that an exact rule could be prescribed for their diet. They overeat and then regret it, and so they keep thinking about what they eat and drink. It is not as it should be. One person cannot lay down an exact rule for another. Everyone should exercise reason and self-control and should act from principle. Our bodies are Christ-purchased possessions, and we are not at liberty to do with them as we please. All who understand the laws of health should realize their obligation to obey these laws, which God has established in their being. Obedience to the laws of health is to be made a matter of personal duty. We ourselves must suffer the results of violated law. We must individually answer to God for our habits and practices. Therefore, the question with us is not, what is the world's practice, but how shall I, as an individual, treat the habitation that God has given me?
Very good.
Flesh is food.
Yep.
The diet appointed man in the beginning did not include animal food, not until after the flood, when every green thing on the earth had been destroyed, did man receive permission to eat flesh. In choosing man's food in Eden, the Lord showed what was the best diet. In the choice made for Israel, he taught the same lesson. He brought the Israelites out of Egypt and undertook their training that they might be a people for his own possession. Through them, he desired to bless and teach the world. He provided them with the food best adapted for his purpose, not flesh, but manna, the bread of heaven. It was only because of their discontent and their murmuring for the flesh pots of Egypt that animal food was granted them, and this only for a short time. Its use brought disease and death to thousands. Yet the restrictions to the non-flesh diet was never heartily accepted. It continued to be the cause of discontent and murmuring, open or secret, and it was not made permanent. Upon their settlement in Canaan, the Israelites were permitted to the use of animal food, but under careful restrictions, which tended to lessen the evil results. The use of swine's flesh was prohibited, as also of other animals and of birds and of fish whose flesh was pronounced unclean. Of the meats permitted, the eating of the fat and the blood were strictly forbidden. Only such animals could be used for food as were in good condition. No creature that was torn, that had died of itself, or from which the blood had not been carefully drained, could be used as food. By departing from the plan divinely appointed for their diet, the Israelites suffered a great loss. They desired a flesh diet, and they reaped its results. They did not reach God's ideal of character or fulfill his purpose. The Lord gave them their request, but sent leanness into their soul. Psalm 106:15. They valued the earthly above the spiritual, and the sacred preeminence, which was his purpose for them, they did not attain. Reasons for discarding flesh foods. Those who eat flesh are but eating grains and vegetables at second hand, for the animal receives from these things the nutrition that produces growth. The life that was in the grains and vegetables passes into the eater. We receive it by eating the flesh of the animal. How much better to get it direct by eating the food that God provided for our use? Flesh was never the best food, but its use is now doubly objectionable, since disease in animals is so rapidly increasing. Those who use flesh food little know what they are eating. Often, if they could see the animals when living and know the quality of the meat they are eating, they would turn from it with loathing. People are continually eating flesh that is filled with tuberculosis and cancerous germs. Tuberculosis, cancer, and other fatal diseases are thus communicated. The tissue of the swine swarmed with parasites. Of the swine, God said, "It is unclean unto you. You shall not eat of their flesh, nor touch their dead carcass." Deuteronomy 14:8. This command was given because swine's flesh is unfit for food. Swine are scavengers, and this is the only use they were intended to serve. Never, under any circumstances, was their flesh to be eaten by human beings. It is impossible for the flesh of any living creature to be wholesome when filth is its natural element and when it feeds upon every detestable thing. Often animals are taken to market and sold for food when they are so diseased that their owners fear to keep them longer. And some of the processes of fattening them for market produce disease. Shut away from the light and pure air, breathing the atmosphere of filthy stables, perhaps fattening on decaying food, the entire body soon becomes contaminated with foul matter. Animals are often transported long distances and subjected to great suffering in reaching a market. Taken from the green pastures and traveling for weary miles over the hot, dusty roads or crowded into filthy cars, feverish and exhausted, often for many hours deprived of food and water, the poor creatures are driven to their death that human beings may feast on the carcasses. Yuck.
Yeah.
Doesn't it sound bad? Yeah.
Yes.
Doesn't make you want to eat it, does it?
Have a good
No.
Thanksgiving, right?
No.
Have a
I,
good
I think
turkey.
it's disgusting anyway.
Yeah.
In many places, fish become so contaminated by the filth on which they feed as to be a cause of disease. This is especially the case where the fish come in contact with the sewage of large cities. The fish that are fed on the contents of the drains may pass into distant waters and may be caught where the water is pure and fresh. Thus, when used as food, they bring disease and death on those who do not suspect the danger. The effects of a flesh diet may not be immediately realized, but this is no evidence that it is not harmful. Few can be made to believe that it is the meat they have eaten which has poisoned their blood and caused their suffering. Many die of diseases wholly due to meat eating, while the real cause is not suspected by themselves or by others.
The moral evils of eating flesh are not less marked than are the physical ills. Flesh food is injurious to the health, and whatever affects the body has a corresponding effect on the mind and the soul. Think of the cruelty to animals that eating involves, and its effect on those who inflict and those who behold it, how it destroys the tenderness with which we should regard these creatures of God. The intelligence displayed by many dumb animals approaches so closely to human intelligence that it is a mystery. The animals see and hear and love and fear and suffer. They use their organs far more faithfully than many human beings use theirs. They manifest sympathy and tenderness toward their companions in suffering. Many animals show an affection for those who have charge of them far superior to the affection shown by some of the human race. They form attachments for man that are not broken without the greatest suffering to them. What man with a human heart who has ever cared for domestic animals could look into their eyes, so full of confidence and affection, and willingly give them over to the butcher's knife? How could he devour their flesh as a sweet morsel? It is a mistake to suppose that muscular strength depends on the use of animal food. The needs of the system can be better supplied, and more vigorous health can be enjoyed without its use. The grains, the fruits, nuts, and vegetables contain all the nutritive properties necessary to make good blood. These elements are not so well or so fully supplied by a flesh diet. Had the use of flesh been essential to health and strength, animal food would have been included in the diet appointed man in the beginning. When the use of flesh food is discontinued, there is often a sense of weakness, a lack of vigor. Many urge this as evidence that flesh food is essential, but it's because foods of this class are stimulating, because they fever the blood and excite the nerves, that they are so missed. Some will find it as difficult to leave off flesh eating as it is for the drunkard to give up his dram, but they will be better for the change. When flesh food is discarded, its place should be supplied with a variety of grains, nuts, vegetables, and fruits that will be both nourishing and appetizing. This is especially necessary in the case of those who are weak or who are taxed with continuous labor. In some countries where poverty abounds, flesh is the cheapest food. Under these circumstances, the change will be made with greater difficulty, but it can be effected. We should, however, consider the situation of the people and the power of lifelong habit, and should be careful not to urge even right ideas unduly. None should be urged to make the change abruptly. The place of meat should be supplied with wholesome foods that are inexpensive. In this matter, very much depends on the cook. With care and skill, dishes may be prepared that will be both nutritious and appetizing, and will, to a great degree, take the place of flesh food. In all cases, educate the conscience, enlist the will, supply good, wholesome food, and the change will be readily made, and the demand for flesh will soon cease. Is it not time that all should aim to dispense with flesh foods? How can those who are seeking to become pure, refined, and holy, that they may have the companionship of heavenly angels, continue to use as food anything that has so harmful an effect on soul and body? How can they take the life of God's creatures that they may consume the flesh as a luxury? Let them rather return to the wholesome and delicious food given to man at the beginning, and themselves practice and teach their children to practice mercy toward the dumb creatures that God has made and has placed under our dominion.
Yeah, that's funny. I used to work with guys that raise beef cattle for market, and they would tell me, "Oh, you've got to have meat for protein." I go,
Yeah.
"Oh, really? Well, where do the cows get their protein?" You don't see them eat meat. I said, "I don't need anybody to chew my grass for me. I can do that just fine." And they get all upset because they're making money. They do it for money.
We've turned to a vegan diet. It's been 12 years for me and Ed. We've only been Adventists for 12 years.
Mhm.
And when we turned, we kind of did it kind of suddenly, like she says not to do.
Right.
And he had a tremendous detox reaction to that.
Wow.
He just broke out, and just his skin was just in horrible condition for a long time.
Mhm.
Mm.
Interesting.
Did you want to read Cindy? Was Cindy on the phone? Okay,
Yeah,
let's-
looks like
It's like
What
she's
time?
on their phone.
What time is it? Okay.
you got 10 minutes.
10
Okay,
minutes.
I'll read a little while. Extremes in diet. Not all who profess to believe in dietary reform are really reformers. With many persons, reform consists merely in discarding certain unwholesome foods. They do not understand clearly the principles of health, and their tables, still loaded with harmful dainties, are far from being an example of Christian temperance and moderation. Another class, in their desire to set a right example, go to the opposite extreme. Some are unable to obtain the most desirable foods, and instead of using such things as would best supply the lack, they adopt an impoverished diet. Their food does not supply the elements needed to make good blood. Their health suffers, their usefulness is impaired, and their example tells against rather than in favor of reform in diet. Others think that since health requires a simple diet, there need be little care in the selection or preparation of food. Some restrict themselves to a very meager diet, not having sufficient variety to supply the needs of the system, and they suffer in consequence. Those who have but a partial understanding of the principles of reform are often the most rigid, not only in carrying out their views themselves, but in urging them on their families and their neighbors. The effect of their mistaken reforms, as seen in their own ill health and their efforts to force their views upon others, give many a false idea of dietetic reform and lead them to reject it altogether. Those who understand the laws of health and who are governed by principle will shun the extremes, both of indulgence and restriction. Their diet is chosen not for the mere gratification of appetite, but for the upbuilding of the body. They seek to preserve every power in the best condition for highest service to God and man. The appetite is under the control of reason and conscience, and they're rewarded with health of body and mind. While they do not urge their views offensively upon others, their example is a testimony in the favor of right principles. These persons have a wide influence for good. There's real common sense in dietetic reform. The subject should be studied broadly and deeply, and no one should criticize others because their practice is not, in all things, in harmony with his own. It is impossible to make an unvarying rule to regulate everyone's habits, and no one should think himself a criterion for all. Not all can eat the same things. Foods that are palatable and wholesome to one person may be distasteful and even harmful to another. Some cannot use milk, while others thrive on it. Some persons cannot digest peas and beans, others find them wholesome. For some, the coarser grain preparations are good food, while others cannot use them. Those who live in new countries or in poverty-stricken districts where fruits and nuts are scarce should not be urged to exclude milk and eggs from their dietary. It is true that persons in full flesh and in whom the animal passions are strong need to avoid the use of stimulating foods, especially in families of children who are given to sensual habits. Eggs should not be used. But in the case of persons whose blood-making organs are feeble, especially if other foods to supply the needed elements cannot be obtained, milk and eggs should not be wholly discarded. Great care should be taken, however, to obtain milk from healthy cows and eggs from healthy fowls that are well fed and well cared for, and the eggs should be so cooked as to be most easily digested. The diet reform should be progressive. As disease in animals increases, the use of milk and eggs will become more and more unsafe. An effort should be made to supply their place with other things that are healthful and inexpensive. The people everywhere should be taught how to cook without milk and eggs so far as possible, and yet have their food wholesome and palatable. The practice of eating but 2 meals a day is generally found a benefit to health. Yet under some circumstances, persons may require a third meal. This would, however, if taken at all, be very light and a food most easily digested. Crackers, the English biscuit or swayback, and fruit or cereal coffee are the foods best suited for the evening meal. Some are continually anxious lest our food, however simple and helpful, may hurt them. To these, let me say, do not think your food will injure you. Do not think about it at all. Eat according to your best judgment, and when you have asked the Lord to bless the food for the strengthening of your body, believe that he hears your prayer and be at rest. Because principle requires us to discard those things that irritate the stomach and impair health, we should remember that impoverished diet produces poverty of the blood. Cases of disease most difficult to cure result from this cause. The system is not sufficiently nourished, and dyspepsia and general debility are the result. Those who use such a diet are not always compelled by poverty to do so. They choose it through ignorance or negligence, or to carry out their erroneous ideas of reform. God is not honored when the body is neglected or abused and is thus unfitted for his service. Care for the body by providing it for it food that is relishable and strengthening is one of the first duties of the householder. It's far better to have less expensive clothing and furniture than to stint the supply of food. Some householders stint the family table in order to provide expensive entertainment for visitors. This is unwise. In the entertainment of guests, there should be greater simplicity. Let the needs of the family have first attention. Unwise economy and artificial customs often prevent the exercise of hospitality where it is needed and would be a blessing. The regular supply of food for our table should be such that the unexpected guest can be made welcome without burdening the housewife to make extra preparation. All should learn what to eat and how to cook it. Men as well as women need to understand the simple, healthful preparation of food. Their business often calls them where they cannot obtain wholesome food. Then, if they have a knowledge of cookery, they can use it to good purpose. Carefully study your diet. Study from cause to effect. Cultivate self-control. Keep appetite under the control of reason. Never abuse the stomach by overeating, but do not deprive yourself of the wholesome, palatable food that health demands. The narrow ideas of some would-be health reformers have been a great injury to the cause of hygiene. Hygienists should remember that dietetic reform will be judged to a great degree by the provision they make for their tables. Instead of taking a course that will bring discredit upon it, they should do so exemplify its principles as to commend them to candid minds. There's a large class who will oppose any reform movement, however reasonable, if it places a restriction on the appetite. They consult taste instead of reason or the laws of health. By this class, all who leave the beaten track of custom and advocate reform will be accounted radical, no matter how consistent their course. That these persons may have no ground for criticism, hygienists should not try to see how different they can be from others, but should come as near to them as possible without the sacrifice of principle. When those who advocate hygienic reform go to extremes, it's no wonder that many who regard these persons as representing health principles reject the reform altogether. These extremes frequently do more harm in a short time than could be undone by a lifetime of consistent living. Hygienic reform is based upon principles that are broad and far-reaching, and we should not belittle it by narrow views and practices. But no one should permit opposition or ridicule, or a desire to please or influence others, to turn him from true principles or cause him lightly to regard them. Those who are governed by principle will be firm and decided in standing for the right. Yet in all their associations, they will manifest a generous, Christ-like spirit and true moderation. Okay, I think we're about out of time, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, so Sandy, you get to make all the comments since you didn't get to read.
I don't have any. I think she does a good job. And there I have seen vegans that would turn me off. They're so unhealthy and so drab and can't move.
Yep.
And then I've seen
I've
some
seen
that
them
are full of
too.
energy. And same with vegetarian. It's like And I've seen meat eaters the same way. So it depends on the person, but
Right.
you
Yeah.
need to know what your body needs and do it right. Because,
What's like she
Yeah.
said, depends if you're sitting in an office all day, working on the computer, or are you outside working in the field all day? It takes
Big
different
difference.
fuel
Big
to keep
difference.
going.
Yeah.
you get hungry.
Yeah.
And the Israelites in reading through the Torah so many times, I'm not sure, but I'm kind of convinced that the only time that they ate meat was when they sacrificed it. When they wanted to eat meat, they had to take it and have it sacrificed.
Mhm.
And there's certain ones where they take most of the meat home and eat it. But I seem to get the impression that they only ate meat that they brought to sacrifice.
Who are you talking about? All the Israelites?
The Israelites, yeah.
Well, they had to do so. They had millions of animals, so I'm sure they ate it too.
I don't know.
I
We have no
don't know. I
record of
don't
it.
think they had millions.
We have no record of them
There's
eating animals every day.
But there's
only
no
when you
record
take it
that
to
they
the
don't.
temple.
And there was,
They don't
and
say
I
what
can't
they eat.
remember it. There was one verse I read in there that said, I think they only eat what they take and sacrifice.
And they ate manna the rest
They
of the
don't
40
eat. You're
years.
talking about the priest?
No,
Well,
all the people.
All the people.
Because the people that go take them to sacrifice can't eat them.
Oh
Yes,
yeah,
they can.
yes, there are certain sacrifices that they eat.
Yep.
Yes.
That you
Yeah,
take
when they
home.
take for
There's different offerings.
yeah.
That I don't know. I just
When-
know the
when it's
priest-
just,
the priest.
Yeah, well, if you
The
read
sin
through all,
offering, I think, is only
yeah, the
priest.
sin offerings are priests, but if you bring it for other
The
ones,
peace offerings you take
peace
home.
offerings, and there's other ones that you take some home. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember how many sacrifices Solomon made when they dedicated the temple. So we're
Lots.
2,000
Oh.
sheep.
Amazing. Yeah.
Lots.
That
And they
feeds a
took
lot of
food
people.
home with everybody.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, so
All right.
this
Next
was
time will be on the
this-
26th.
this was a terrible lesson for tomorrow.
That's what I was thinking as we're reading it.
I was planning on pigging out.
Yeah,
Well,
for
I don't
sure.
Yeah.
have to worry.
Yeah.
You don't have- yeah, there you go.
Violet and I
Violet
are
will eat
doing
healthy.
fine, because
No,
Violet
no
and I are having our own Thanksgiving at our own house alone.
more. Okay.
That's right.
All right.
We'll be just
We'll
fine.
eat just what we want.
So now we got to lay
Yeah.
out the cranberry sauce and the pumpkin pie and
I won't have any.
Eat in moderation. That's what she says. Or
Yeah.
that's
go.
right.
then go work out, Dave.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I do that
Or
every day.
work out.
Work
and then
out
go
before,
eat.
then go
Yeah.
eat. Yeah.
So can I stop the donut shop now and just have a half a donut? That,
Yeah.
that all right?
Daddy loved donuts.
You know
Yeah.
what I find
Donuts, I
interesting?
think,
They,
for my dad.
again, we were listening to a health message over the weekend. And I thought, you want to find out how health conscious the church is, go to their potluck and look at their dessert table.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's not the church. It's just people bring it. You don't have to eat it.
That's
Well,
right.
So
If they
What?
didn't eat it, then wouldn't be brought.
One church we went
if
to,
you
the
can't
lady
control
that was in
yourself, then
charge
that's
of
not their problem.
the lady that was in charge of potlucks, she would not allow desserts at the potluck.
For a long
For a
time.
long time
The
that
church did not allow.
the church did
desserts.
not allow desserts.
Yeah, there was a big argument. One time there was a funeral and another church was coming because the half the membership was Baptist and half were Adventist, and they were trying to ban meat from the kitchen. They didn't want them to bring their fried chicken.
Right.
What do you say?
Well,
They weren't
no,
gonna
we
bring
just
the
read where
sanctions.
Mrs. White said on Sabbath, children should have a treat, something special. So I'm
Right.
not gonna sit there and pick on people. Everybody has their own mind. They're
Oh, yeah.
smart. They can figure out what to do.
Mhm.
All right, we will see you guys on Sabbath. And I believe
Okay.
it's
Lord
Donnie and
willing.
Abel.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Donnie. Have you? I'll text him again.
Is he scheduled?
Yeah. I'll tell him happy Thanksgiving, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eat a
Have
simple
fun.
meal.
Enjoy, right? Yeah.
Eat a simple meal.
So.
All right.
all
Well,
right.
that's
Okay,
good.
take care.